you should remember these as you're watching this series, but I think you should just remember them in general because they do describe the world more generally. Big trends emerge from individual behavior without anyone running the show. Institutions create incentives, and incentives determine behavior. Economics 101. Those are something you should bear in mind because, as I said in the video of the first chapter, a lot of people tend to want to they want to attribute certain phenomena to conspiracies, or there's some group of people running the show. But the authors are arguing, and of course we are too, that no, this is the result of certain people setting certain rules in certain institutions, which in turn influences how people act. And those decisions have consequences both on the other people in the institutions and even the country at large, depending on what we're talking about. So it's worth bearing that in mind when you want to know, hey, why are people acting this way? It's because the incentives are such that it incentivizes people to act in that way.
Yeah. And with that one, I think this is a realization I came up with. It was a guy with some real mental issues, looking at the things that were happening in the world as I was trying to create a own universe, creative universe of my own, something called Carbon. That was something I started working on as a kid. Not as a kid, I guess as a kid relative to now. So back in the early 2000s when I was in college, I started working on this story that was based off of the Final Fantasy universe, this video game universe, and all these ideas. Then eventually grew to be my own. So I was like, okay, I have to develop political systems, develop economies, like financial economies. How is the market going to work? How are people going to be delivering things? What's going to be the reasons that you're going to have different systems of law? And I started looking at examples of what's happening in actual reality. And I was still a little bit more into conspiracy theories. And it got to the point where I realized the only thing scarier than any conspiracy theory is realizing that there's no conspiracy theory, that this is just the way things are. And people seem to have that need where they want to feel that, oh, there's actually some controlling power, be it a deity or God or some other system that's, oh, things are bad because of this one particular thing that I can identify and maybe adjust. And if I pray or if I account for this other thing, I'll be able to stop this one thing. But in general, it's just nature. It's just the way people interact. That some bad things happen, some good things happen. We just pay less attention to the good. And I think that's kind of where this is a good insight to have, where maybe it's not a conspiracy. Maybe they're actually just things that happen. And to me, I think that's, for sure, it's more realistic to what reality is. It's more accurate to what reality is. But at the same point, just because these many things happen for this bad thing happen, think about all the other positive things. Think about how much worse those bad things could have been. And also realize that since there isn't a big bad out there that you have to battle, you personally can be an agent of major change, both in your life and the lives of other people around you, because you might be that first thing that thinks about something, says something, does something that leads to all these other people doing positive things.
Yes, exactly.
So the next one was?
This one I really like. Universities' problems are deep and fundamental. Most academic marketing is semi-fraudulent. Grading is largely nonsense. Students don't learn or study much. Students cheat frequently. Liberal arts education fails because it presumes a false theory of learning. Professors and administrators waste students' money and time in order to line their own pockets. Everyone engages in self-righteous moral grandstanding to disguise their selfish cronyism. Professors pump out unemployable graduate students into oversaturated academic job markets for self-serving reasons, and so on. So this book and this discussion is going to cover all of these things.
Yeah. Now, this one again, you can go in and you can put arguments against it, but I think some of these things are practical. The numbers are out there, the examples are out there. It might be of interest to anybody who's listening to this. My background in education, my postgrad was graphic design, and then graphic design and animation with a postgrad. Like my graduate was graphic design, and postgrad was some course in critical animation, not concepts of animation. I can't remember this thing right. It's not that important to me, but for some people it's important. So for my background is liberal arts in school. And yours, Stephen?
So I just have culinary school, Culinary Institute of America after high school.
So we're coming from that field. So someone was like, oh, we're biased from being in the STEM fields. No, we're not STEM people. These are things that we just observed and in this practicality sense. And we both make our living somewhat Stephen more directly in that. I guess also for me, I do like freelance stuff where I'm working with those things that I learned, but we've learned a lot of things outside of it. And we've also taken in a lot of information and education outside of the schooling that we actually had. So I think with this one, it's true. Some of those things that literally just think with some of the majors out there, what is the practical actual application of some of those majors if it's not teaching those things to other people? It's an interesting thing out there. So yeah.
And I keep harping on this over and over, but I've been delving into more public choice theory stuff lately. Public choice, for those who don't know, it's using economics to address the problems of political science. The reason, the whole reason it emerged, and they talk about this early in the book, was because the old way used to be believed that, okay, people are just rational actors in the economy and people will make good decisions, so allow freedom. Now, we're sort of coming from that perspective. We can get into the weeds of that. That's a whole conversation, which we'll probably do next with human action. But
Yes.
the pushback against this is something like, well, here are the problems caused by laissez-faire. Here are the externalities, all that. So we need bureaucracy. We need good agency staffed by good people to run it, and then everything will run smoothly. Now, the pushback against this, courtesy of James Buchanan, Gordon Tullock, George Stigler, and other people, was that no, the people staffing these agencies, they have self-interest, they have motives, they have incentives, all that. And if you just this idea of, oh, we just put people in charge, have them supervise everything, everything will run smoothly. No, it falls apart because those same people, they want raises, they want promotions, they want prestige. I reposted a good article recently written by a guy who was in the EPA for 30 years, and he talked about all the corruption there, how like oil executives would have relationships with regulators, how regulators who tried to do the right thing, the lobbyists would get them fired. Of course, the regulators who play ball with the lobbyists, as it were, the lobbyists put in a good word for them in their companies. They get jobs later working for those companies, all that. And again, this isn't to say that these people are evil. It's just people responding to incentives. They want promotions, they want raises, all that. So this repeatedly insisted idea of we just need better people running things. I don't see how or why it's valid, because again, they're not really measuring these people on how ethical they are, number one. And I keep bringing up the point that even if you get these good people, what happens when they leave? It's going to be back to self-interested people just doing what they want to do. And nobody has convinced me as of yet that somehow people in power are shielded from this effect. So
Yeah. And that's the Environmental Protection Agency that you mentioned, with the EPA there for some of our non-American based people. But with this book as well, it is focused on the schooling system in the United States of America. But I still think a lot of places in the world follow the lead of the United States of America. They have this this illegitimate or this wrong view of thinking that wealth is somehow the natural of humanity. And I think Thomas Sowell puts this in a good way, where he's talking about how poverty is the general natural state, and we have to think about, okay, when there's actual prosperity, when there's actual wealth, when there's actual civilization, when there's actual peace, those are the things that are unusual from the general state of nature. So we should look at why does that happen. And I think whether we consciously do it or not, a lot of countries look at the United States of America and say, oh, we want that kind of wealth, we want that kind of standard of living. Oh, are they doing it because of their schooling system? So we need to adopt the schooling system. Are they doing better because they have an environmental protection agency? Oh, so if that's what's happening in their EPA, we should follow that. That's why a lot of people are out there currently like, oh, I can't believe Trump pulled the United States of America out of the Paris Accords. Because they feel they're saying America still sets that kind of example for the world. So that's why I think this conversation is important, not just for the people in the United States of America, but the world in general, because we're getting to an increasingly globalized world that people look at examples from places that are doing much better, and they want to copy what's happening in those places. And my major objection to some of these collectivist type of central planning type of things, or putting so much power into one place, is not necessarily, oh, I want to keep all the good, positive things that I might possibly earn. And I don't want any of you butchers out there getting none of my goods. No, I'm more concerned of somebody else doing something horrible than then socializing the negative effects of that thing and have it spread to all these other people, including me, that I had nothing to do with that decision. I wasn't the one who decided to do things that way. But because we've given this person so much power and influence, even the bad things they do, and in most cases, the bad things they do are the ones they socialize, and the good things they do, they try their most to keep as much of that as possible. Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.